Hi, this is Liz, friendly neighborhood reference librarian and cinephile, and this is a film history lesson. That's right, after almost a year of movie picks, I'm doing something different. It's no secret that I love film, but that doesn't just mean I like to watch movies. For me, learning film history from production techniques to cultural impact is equally, if not more interesting. And since September has Banned Books Week, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, film censorship. Wait, come back, I swear this is interesting. Some librarians aren't a fan of the term banned books, and honestly, I can see why. While many books in the U.S. are challenged or even removed from school or library shelves, they are not banned from being sold, nor are they banned from being read. But film has a long and very real history of censorship. Not just in places where we'd expect, like the People's Republic of China. I'm actually going to talk about censorship and suppression in the United Kingdom and the good old United States. And yes, I will have examples. The more extreme example of the two is the United Kingdom. I first became aware of this when I learned about video nasties. Of course, when I heard this term, I thought it just meant extreme violence and gore. Nope, turns out this was a term applied to movies that were banned in the UK. Now, there were already laws like the Obscene Publications Act of 1959, but nothing prepared the self-appointed moral guardians for the shock of grindhouse horror and exploitation movies. Think of it as akin to the parental advisory for music hysteria of the 1980s. Oh, and yes, the UK had their own version of Tipper Gore, Mary Whitehouse. She was a conservative social activist who helped stir up panic about these movies, leading to moral decay and its effect on the children. I don't know, maybe make sure your kids aren't watching Driller Killer if you're so concerned. I mean, I wanted to rent Dead Alive when I was 9 or 10, and my mom rightfully shut that down. Also, just as an aside, there are plenty of kids who do watch horror movies with their parents. And they're fine because those parents have discussions with their children about the difference between movies and reality. I digress. This went beyond labels, and it led to the Video Recordings Act of 1984. This meant that all video releases had to be submitted for classification. If not, they couldn't be distributed within the UK, and the British Board of Film Censors could make cuts to the film. And horror, with its extreme violence, was the #1 target. There were almost 80 movies that were banned from being sold or even shown in their intended uncut form, or in some cases just at all. Movies like The Evil Dead, I Spit on Your Grave, Absurd, Faces of Death, Last House on the Left, the list goes on. Actually, check out the documentary Video Nasties, The Definitive Guide for more information on this. I'm not saying all of these titles are must-sees. I myself think that Notsploitation titles like The Gestapo's Last Orgy are gross, to say the least. But it is absurd that while Western countries wagged their finger at nations that banned books like the Satanic Verses, they tried to ban and censor films in the midst of a moral panic. Thankfully, the bans are all but unenforceable now in the UK, but the video nasty era is a dark mark for film. But on the bright side, it gave a lot of movies free publicity. Now, the US never went as far to have a nationwide ban on any movie, aside from state and town bans. But there was the Hays Code. The actual name of this is the Motion Picture Production Code, which dictated film content from 1934 until technically the 60s, though it really lost its steam in the 1950s. Pre-code movies are pretty interesting and fly in the face of what a lot of people think older movies were like. There were assertive women, there were morally ambiguous characters. I mean, 2 women kiss in the movie Morocco, for heaven's sake. But once upon a time in 1915, the Supreme Court said that films don't fall under free speech. This was due to a case, Mutual Film Court versus Industrial Commission of Ohio. Thankfully, that was overturned in the 50s, but it paved the way for the Hays Code. That, plus there was a real backlash to Hollywood, what with real-life scandals like Fatty Arbuckle and movies like Freaks being released. Yeah, people were really morally offended by the idea that people with disabilities and deformities exist. One woman actually claimed that that movie caused her to miscarry. And states and towns were already banning films, and the studios pretty much adopted the code out of fear. Once again, moral panic was a huge influence. The code had a lot of suggestions. No blasphemy, criminals can't be depicted positively in any way, and oh, you better believe women are sexless. You also couldn't reference venereal diseases, nudity, drugs, or miscegenation. Yep, don't take the Lord's name in vain, and don't you dare mix races. Not shockingly, a lot of the code was developed by the religious leaders and self-appointed moral guardians who were concerned about movies' effect on the children. Nice to see that "won't someone please think of the children" has always been the most popular excuse for censorship. Again, as decades went on, the code had less and less power, and by the 1960s, no one was really paying attention to it. We did get the MPAA out of it, which, while not dictating content, is also useless as their methodology makes no sense. But as that is a conversation for another time, I would just recommend the documentary "This Film Is Not Yet Rated" for more information. Still, a movie can be released even if it gets an NC-17. Now, towns have still banned films from being shown in city limits, and theaters have refused to carry pictures, even in the 80s and 90s. The John Waters cult classic Pink Flamingos was ruled obscene by an Orange County, Florida judge, and tapes were pulled off the shelves of rental stores. This came about because a couple rented the film, were outraged, complained to a local Bureau of Investigation, who then sent a 14-year-old to rent the movie in a sting operation. The owner of the store, Steve Zlatkis, was arrested, all because someone saw a movie they didn't like. And this was in the 90s. More famous, of course, is Martin Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ controversy. This was protested by many, and some privately owned theaters refused to show it. Not to mention some churches forbade their parishioners from seeing it. This is actually kind of funny because for all the accusations of blasphemy, the movie is very affirming of Jesus' sacrifice at the end of the film. It's almost like the pearl clutchers haven't watched the movie. I mean, say what you will about the Pink Flamingos controversy, at least the complaining party actually watched the film. Although they really should have been clued in when the tagline of the movie is "an exercise in bad taste." Personally, my favorite censorship story is Cannibal Holocaust. With a name like that, of course it was banned in many countries for graphic and realistic violence. But in one particular case, the violence is so extreme, director Ruggero Deodato was brought up on obscenity charges in Italy. Oh, and then murder charges. Yes, people thought the Cannibal Holocaust was a snuff film. He had to prove to the court that he didn't kill anyone, which should just say he didn't. Any people anyway. That turtle really does die on screen, which is why some, even those that usually don't advocate for censorship, think that this movie should be censored. After all, a scene of real animal cruelty is far different than simulated violence. I will, however, leave that up to you, the viewer. There's one more type of censorship I'd like to discuss, and that is self-censorship. This is when a studio or distributor decides to not release something, which, as private entities, they are within their legal rights to do. This happened very recently with the Universal Studios picture The Hunt. From the looks of it, it's about a group of poorer Americans who are hunted by the wealthy elite. I mean, we've seen this before: Most Dangerous Game, Surviving the Game, Hard Target, the very recent Ready or Not. But with little evidence, the narrative became that it was about liberals hunting Trump supporters, and therefore it's anti-conservative, and Universal pulled the film saying it's not the right time. Which, I'm just going to say, based on the plot, even if that rumor is true, that's kind of like saying Hard Target is anti-veteran because Lance Henriksen hunts homeless veterans. Nevertheless, when this movie is eventually released 2 years from now with little fanfare, it will likely market itself or get the reputation of banned, despite the fact that the distributor/studio just got cold feet. The 2000 Japanese film Battle Royale had a similar reputation. Battle Royale is the movie about a bunch of students having to kill each other on an island for entertainment purposes, and had some retroactive recognition due to plot similarities with The Hunger Games, which both owe a lot to The Running Man just to crush the ripoff accusations. When I heard about this film in the early aughts, it was reputed to be a banned film. The truth is, it had a hard time finding a distributor in the US because after the events of Columbine, no one really wanted to touch a movie about school kids killing each other. I mean, I had to get an all-region DVD to Korea back when I was in high school. Thankfully, due to big-name fans like Tarantino, it now has US distributors, though I have seen the too extreme for the US marketing. Aside from lack of distribution, there are cases when a studio deliberately keeps a film out of circulation. And the first example is a Disney movie. You've probably heard of Song of the South. It came out in the 1940s. You've maybe seen it on TV decades back or portions of the film on Disney compilations. But no complete version of this movie has ever been released since the 40s. Why? Well, the fact that it's set on a southern plantation has something to do with it, and while it's supposedly set during the Reconstruction era, the movie's handling of race is one that is, by all accounts of people who have seen it, a little bit tone deaf. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there are also a lot of different reactions and analysis of this movie, so honestly, it might be interesting to view it in a historical context. However, Disney right now wants to own every intellectual property on the planet, not embarrass itself, so we will likely not be seeing Song of the South on Disney+. The other film is one that is really close to my heart, Ken Russell's The Devils. Now, Ken Russell really liked to walk the line between daring auteur and a perv with a camera, and The Devils is the best of both worlds. It's a sharp film about the dangers of mass hysteria and moral panic. Hey, timely. And the dangers of religion and politics being bedfellows. It's also lurid, exploitative, and has a scene where a bunch of crazed nuns have an orgy with a giant crucifix. You heard that right. To no one's surprise, the movie angered a lot of people. The film had scenes removed, and some scenes are just lost to time. There will likely never be a version of Russell's complete vision. And there will likely never be a release in America right now because Warner Brothers has this under lock and key. There are still people who are mad about this movie, some of them working at Warner Brothers. Either they don't think it should be released at all, or they are scared of what will happen if it is. And so until they die, someone needs to just go find a VHS rip or a region-free copy if you're curious. This shouldn't be the case, but unfortunately it is. I'm lucky. I have seen a screening of the most complete version of The Devils that there is. And for all of the shock value, it is a very good and timely story about politics, mob rule, and obsession. And really, I just wish more people could see and decide for themselves. Now, of course, in all of my examples, I have to acknowledge that there are still nations where censorship is alive and well. However, I bring up the cases in the US and the UK to remind you that even in places where you don't expect it, creativity faces challenges or censorship. There will always be small-minded people who use morals and the children as a way to censor things that they just find uncomfortable, be it swearing in movies or the fact that transgender teenagers exist. And before you know it, they'll likely come for something that you like too. So, you know what? See all those movies that the self-appointed moral guardians don't want you to see. Go watch a gory horror movie. Go watch Less Temptation of Christ for yourself. Go check out Salo. Okay, go read the Wikipedia summary and then see if you want to check out Salo. I really can't in good conscience recommend that one without a warning. And even if you don't want to watch any of this, support the right of others to do so. Oh, and free the devils. Special thanks to Derry Community Access Media, empowering independent voices. I'll see you next month for October in a deep dive on horror.